We know housing is ridiculously expensive, but there's been a few changes. Now, number one, interest rates. Things to keep in mind. When is it an optimal time to buy a house? Obviously outside of necessity. When interest rates are low, prices are high, or the opposite. If interest rates are high, but prices are low, right? Because you can always refinance if you have to, or you can take a discount. Now, you want to have a higher valued, a lower valued house with a higher interest rate, so you can refi if you have to. Now, a couple things that are really important to keep in mind, okay, is that 2 years ago, we saw interest rates plummet, right? Rates got cut to zero. Housing rates, I mean, we saw the 30-year mortgage, right? The 30-year treasury, which mortgages are backed on, dropped down to 1.5%. We saw 30-year mortgages, we saw the going rate at 2.75%. I was screaming at you guys a couple months after COVID hit to refinance, and a lot of you guys did. It saved you a lot of money for the rest of your life, right? And then cheap interest rates, decent size inventory, stimulus checks. People had money. People needed to move because they're working from home. They needed bigger houses. Influx of housing buys. So housing prices started skyrocketing. People were overbidding each other, paying cash. It was crazy. Then we saw interest rates start to tick up. These things started front-running the federal funds rate. And the idea is that as the federal funds rate, which is what the Fed does, goes up, interest rates are going to go up as well. Supply and demand, federal funds rate going up, it's going to cool down buying. But it didn't for a while. We saw 30-year mortgages average 3.4%, and then 3.7%, and then 4%, and then 4.5, 4.9, 5. And 2 months ago, we saw 6.2%, the average 30-year fixed rate for a 30-year mortgage. Now, this isn't the time. Now, just to give you guys a little context, depending on who you listen to when it comes to money, finance, or politics, you're going to hear a lot of different takes on different things. And one thing you often hear is, now, granted, inflation has fucked things up and corporate life has screwed things up as well, so there is a lot of truth to it. But also the idea that, oh, well, my parents only paid $50,000 for their house. This is bullshit. Your parents also probably had a 20% interest rate. So keep that in mind, okay? Take that $50,000 and take a 17% interest rate for 30 years. They paid a lot of money for that house. Yours was 14%? Yeah, there you go. So it is true that boomers and older generations had things cheaper as well. But when you hear somebody complain about it from the housing perspective, while they are right that housing prices have gotten ridiculous, one thing they don't keep in mind is that they got a cheaper house at a ridiculously high interest rate. Now, it took a long time for these rates to come down. So as people refinance, they didn't get the great deals that we can do now, right? Like right now, you can refinance in a year for 3% less and save, $150,000 in interest that you owe to the bank. Okay, now that we've got there, we've seen housing markets finally. Well, some of y'all after the past 6 months, I should probably draw a trailer, but whatever. Housing prices have begun to cool off a little bit. Why is this? Well, the interest rate was significantly high. It got to 6.2%. It's actually fallen down. It's sitting around about 5.7% last I checked. It might actually be lower than that. Why is it dropping? Well, because housing purchases have cooled off. Inventory's starting to pack back up. Because a lot of people couldn't sell their house at the top of the housing market because, yeah, they may make a lot of extra money by selling their house, but what are they going to buy? Something else that's just as overpriced. So most of the housing that we ended up seeing get sold off was people that were selling off secondary homes, rental homes, and a lot of boomers who were like, you know what? Kids are out of the house. They've moved away. We've got this house. It's too much room. You know what? Let's downscale. Let's sell this for, a ridiculous price and go buy a condo somewhere, downscale, or go move somewhere with a lower cost of living. Matter of fact, I was reading an article today about all the boomers that are moving to Mexico City right now. So that's something else we could talk about. Okay? For the first time in a long time, actually for the first time since the 80s, we saw a 20% reduction in mortgage applications in 1 week, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. 20% in 1 week. That means people just stopped applying for mortgages, which means that two things happen. Remember we talked about you purchase houses when either interest rates are high and prices are low, or when prices are high and interest rates are low? Well, we ran into a problem. Housing had peaked and it's still way up here, right? Plus 40% in a lot of places and are higher. And the 30-year fixed rate was at 6%. Now you have two things that stop the buying. If you're going to overpay for a house, at least get a lower interest rate. Or if you're going to, get a high interest rate, at least pay for a cheap house. But we hit that equilibrium and push it up. Now, this is part of what the Federal Reserve has been trying to say that they're doing. They're trying to cut the demand, right? They can't do anything about supply. The amount of houses in the market, they can't do anything about. Well, they probably could because they're buying mortgage-backed securities, but that's a whole other fucking topic. So they can't do anything about demand, but they can stop supply. What is supply? Supply of money. Make it more expensive. And that's what happened. And so now, for the first time in 2 years, we're seeing housing prices start to tick down. Why are they ticking down? Well, because if there's less purchasing, that means the normal turnover of homes means that when something goes into the inventory, it's not immediately getting picked up, which means inventory is starting to go up. Inventory has doubled in the last 2 months. Now, it's doubled from only 300,000 to 600,000, but doubling is doubling, okay? Which means if you have more inventory on the market, what does that do to the value of the ones that are sitting on the market that aren't for sale? Drops the value, all right? So now inventory is going up, driving prices down. Less buyers because of interest rates means naturally the price will come down. And we're actually seeing, last month was the first month in 2 years that we saw homes on the market for 30 days or more lower their price. We didn't see that before. So now we've got prices that are starting to slowly drop. We've got rates that are coming down pretty significant. And we've got inventory going up. Now this means that supposedly, this will continue to drive prices down. But here's the catch. Even if prices come to here, it's still out of budget for most people that didn't buy on the way up 2 years ago, which means that you have a larger and larger pool of renters. We've already seen consumer spending go down. We're seeing personal income go down. And we just got a report that now household debt is at $16 trillion for the first time. Welcome to the cycle of fear and greed and debt slavery. 16 trillion. You could tax the top 1%. Because I know we like to talk about that. And I'm not against or against tax raising. I think it's a complicated subject, and I'm not going to get into it here. But you could tax the top 1% of earners in America, and you wouldn't even be able to take a dent out of this. This is people's personal spending. And credit card and vehicles and homes and student loans, the whole 9 yards. Now, you have more renters, which means if you have a supply and demand imbalance, the same supply but way more demand, the price goes up, okay? I'm slowly getting to where we're going to get to about renting. That means that rent prices are going up. That's why I was screaming at you guys last year, if you're going to re-up for another year, to go tell your landlord now you want to sign the contract, lock in the price before they screw you guys over. Some of y'all did that, and it saved your asses. Some of y'all couldn't. Unfortunately, some of y'all didn't, and it was just ugly. What does this mean for everybody? Well, here's two options. Either housing continues to slow bleed as equities start to go back up and people start investing in other places. We go Canada and we just go back up because now interest rates finally come back down because we know that the Fed is going to tap out potentially at 3.5 to 3.75% on the federal funds rate and then before dropping it again. Or the third option, and that's what scares me. Now, I wrote out a tweet the other night that said, ladies and gentlemen, if the housing market goes, it's night-night. Why do I say that? Because everybody's so fucking over-leveraged again. 81 million people took out home equity loans in the past 2 years against equity that didn't exist 2 years before. So these people had houses that they either owed on, let's say it's a $300,000 house, and they owed $200,000 still on it. So they have $100,000 in equity on the home. Well, now all of a sudden, because the market went crazy and they're sitting in it, their house is now worth $420,000. Well, guess what? Technically, they have $220,000 in equity in their home. So they took out a $100,000 loan against that equity, which means they're technically right back where they were with their original mortgage. Now, that's fine if the house stays up, but what if the housing market slides, like significantly? Everybody goes underwater again. And if we do, and if that pulls everybody underwater and all of a sudden now the debt is there, people can't afford to do other things, they're having to sell off, assets or whatever they have to do. They have to liquidate stuff from their market. They have to do, whatever. They lose their job. A lot of things. That is where we see a massive problem in the economy, especially when it comes to GDP, because now a lot of people are going to be underwater and they're not going to be able to afford a lot of things, which means the housing market would come down significantly in a very quick period of time, or the housing market coming down would trigger this. And that's where we have a problem. So much of the money that's out there right now is tied up in real estate, and it's the only thing that's kind of keeping us floating right now and up in the economy. There's several other factors, but this is one of the big ones. People's money is locked in and they have wealth, or they've taken out loans against their equity, which means that or the equity in their home, which means they have wealth. But it's not, if the market pulls back significantly, a lot of people are going to go underwater. Okay, all that being said, there's so much more. And for those of you guys in chat right now screaming at me, Stocky, that's still bullshit. No, it's not entirely true. Stocky, you're full of shit. Just an opinion, and I'm giving a very watered down version because not everyone in here studies fucking economics, okay? I know some of you guys know about real estate way more than I do. I admit that, okay? I am not an expert on everything real estate, and I don't work for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I don't work in real estate, but then again, just because somebody's a real estate agent, I mean, I'm in Miami. I can throw a rock and everybody has a real estate agency license. But there's a lot more there. I just want to give a watered down version. Now, that brings me to renting. One of the reasons that a lot of people were buying houses cash at overpriced valuations was for a couple reasons. One, they didn't have anywhere else to put their money. Two, interest rates were relatively low. So, hey, buck it, buy a super, overpriced house with a low interest rate, you're fine, right? You lock it in and you're good. But because the housing market was getting so tight and more people were having to become renters, that means you have a bigger pool to select tenants from, meaning you can jack up the price. So you may have paid an extra $30,000 over the value of that house, but you're also going to get an additional $100 to $200 minimum per month in rent, meaning that you get your money back in 10 to 15 years, and you're letting those people pay your mortgage down for you. In some cases, $300 to $400 per month more. Now you might be saying to yourself, and this is where we're going to get to, Stocky, isn't that illegal? Well, technically no, because if one guy is doing it and no one else is, that guy's going to go bankrupt, right? If everyone's doing it, then the price of it goes up, because what is the value of something? Before you get into the humanity of it, we're going to ease into that, but let's start with the money business part of it. What is the value of something? What people are willing to pay for. So the government doesn't step in, right? They didn't say, well, there's nobody gouging and there's nothing. There's all this. Okay. All right. Now let's get back into where we're going, because this is the part where you guys are going to lose your fucking mind. I'm just going to give you numbers and no personal opinions. Okay. I'm just going to give you numbers and what we see. All right. We're going to skip over and gloss over the eviction moratorium. We're going to come back to it in a minute. So then you come into options for affordable rent. Do you let the market take control of it? As less people, are renting, then the prices come down and then others have to compete to bring it down? Or do you need government intervention? So it's market versus government. Both of these are great, and both of these are shit. Both have their advantages, both have their disadvantages. As far as the market, you love the market because with competition, generally is supposed to bring down prices, but right now you have an oversupply of demand. But market and competition is supposed to drive up quality, drive down price. That's what it's supposed to do. Government is supposed to drive down price, but quality generally goes down as well. Think of government subsidied housing, Section 8 housing. They generally tend to not be that great, but people end up getting a roof over their head. So you've got, you give and take there, right? Like you give up the quality, the safety, and everything like that, but you get the lower price and the availability, right? Affordability, availability. So there's an offset there. What this argument ends up bringing in is, do you bring in price caps and price controls? Some cities have attempted it. Some had success. Others attempted it, and it was a disaster. So we don't have enough anecdotal evidence to know what works there. Do you, allow X amount of spaces to be government subsidized and rent control, and X amount of spaces to be market, right? Well, then you get that divide of rich and poor, which we saw, throughout history when we've seen that. There's no easy answer. You guys are all probably, I'm not looking at chat because I know this is divisive. A lot of you guys are probably out here going, well, Stocky, what are you saying? People shouldn't have a right to shelter? I didn't say that. Stocky, what are you saying? I should live in the hood? I ain't saying that either. I'm just letting you know what happens and what has happened and what are the challenges we face moving forward. That's kind of where we're at with that. That brings me to my last point. I hate this shit. Anyone who utilizes the broad term of landlords or renters or tenants should just shut the fuck up. That's like saying everybody's either a Democrat or a Republican. No, that's stupid. And even within the level of Democrat and Republican, let's say, versus Republican, you have 70 million different type of people. Just because they voted for a party doesn't mean that they believe everything that party believes or a faction of that party believes. There's people that are Democrats that fucking own AR-15s. There's Republicans that smoke pot. There is no such thing as uniformity here. Not every landlord is a piece of shit, and not every renter is a victim. There are people who are renters who were making good money during the eviction moratorium and just stopped paying their rent. And then the day before the eviction moratorium was up, they just packed their shit and left. Or people that went in and knew that they couldn't get evicted and trashed the fucking home, had parties, did drugs, whatever they wanted to do, and fucked up the place and walked away. There's corporate landlords who didn't give a shit about anybody and found workarounds and sued to get the moratorium ended so they could kick people out and bring people in, but not only bring people in, but jack up the prices. There's also renters who were parents struggling. Kids were out of school. Their hours were cut. They were working 2-3 jobs, Ubering around just to make ends meet, who got left out in the street and had no way of paying back rent. There's also landlords of people who busted their ass, worked 2-3 jobs, socked their money away, invested for years. And as they had kids, they decided, let's buy a new home. I paid off this home. You know, I worked hard. Let's buy a new home that's bigger for the family. What do we do with the other home? How about we use it as a secondary source of income and rent it out? And they're great fucking people. But now they're evil and they're fucked. Because the moratorium and eviction didn't just hurt renters or didn't just help renters. It also hurt landlords, especially individual landlords. Because these landlords owe a mortgage on a property that they have to pay to a bank, and the bank can't take the house from them until the moratorium ends. But during the eviction freeze, the renter wasn't paying them any money. So at the end of this freeze, the renter doesn't have the money to pay back the landlord, so the renter has to leave. But the landlord now has the bank saying, okay, where's my money? Oh, well, I didn't get it from the renter. Sorry, gone. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, Stocky, I don't feel bad for anybody who has to give up a second house. Fuck them. Nobody should own more than one home. Well, we'll see where you're at in 20 years if you've busted your ass and you finally paid off an asset and you have it. And for the people that are saying, well, fuck the renters, they were just freeloading for a year. No, there were legit a lot of people that were struggling that they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't drink. They didn't do drugs. They weren't freeloaders. They didn't give government handouts. They just got hit with some hard times with some stuff that they couldn't help. I mean, think about how many waiters and waitresses that were renting from places and their restaurant in a city in a city that had mask mandates, get shut down. What did they do wrong? What the fuck did they do wrong? Well, Stocky, they also got a lot of stimulus checks. You think that $400 or $600 a month was enough to supplement completely? No, there's a lot of people. So please understand the difference between corporate landlords and individual landlords and good tenants and shit tenants. So how about we start having a conversation where we stop bringing in individual landlords and good tenants and start focusing on corporate landlords and how they're able to get away with the shit that they do and how shit tenants are able to take advantage of the system. Now, I know you guys are all wanting, you're just licking at the chops right now. You're just like, oh God, Stocky, please tell us, give me your opinion one way or other. Tell me. I want to be confirmed. I want to feel confirmation on my beliefs, or I want to fucking lean into you. No, I'm just here to give you what's going on and how we got there and potential what we can do. Okay? It sucks. That's how the world is. There's no such thing as a utopia, and no form of economics or government or whatever that's run by humans is not going to be fucked up in a lot of ways because we're humans. Now, the definition of corporate landlord could be different from person to person. Somebody could say anybody who owns 3+ units should be considered a corporate landlord. Well, they probably own an LLC, so they are a corporation, so technically, yeah. What makes a shitty renter versus a non-renter? I mean, we could have that argument all day. I just want you guys to think outside the box and not get caught, because a lot of you guys get caught in the echo chambers of us versus them or them versus us. I don't like that, and so I want you guys to kind of broaden it up and say, yes, there's a problem, but we'll never, ever fix problems if we lump everybody together, because then you create enemies that normally would be on the sidelines or in your corner.